Alright then, so at this point I've beaten Partia free. And I figured we would drop like a quick little video here for a developer. Basically just to like give my thoughts, but like my final thoughts here about the game and what I basically thought about it. So here we go. Anyhow, to start off with, let's just jump into the game here. I'll expand basically the window here. Alright, so I'll note that basically I basically completed my run through of this game, and for the most part I basically enjoyed it. But at the same time, I also feel like it's very much a game that could be improved by a lot. So here's basically my thoughts basically on how you can basically improve this game, and just some other thoughts basically about how I basically went around orienting myself to basically play it. I'll note basically the first thing here, by the way, is that when I basically pressed a new game here, one of the first things I basically did was basically turn the expert mode basically off. And part of the reason I basically turned the expert mode off was because of the simple fact that I figured it only factored into how much experience your troops basically got when they basically pounded on stuff with their attacks. And I figured if I had a 10% experience boost for my troops when they basically hit stuff, it wouldn't be so pressing to actually have to go to the arena basically to level them up basically out of combat. But here's basically something I basically want to note here. I'm very much happy that I basically turned the expert mode on, because I basically found out that there's basically more to it than that. But at the same time, I sort of feel that this is where the information sort of aspects of your game sort of come into play, because the lack of information what every aspects of the game basically does is really hurting your game here, I think. I didn't know, for example, that say with expert mode on, there's more troops basically to fight in the mission where you have Hem, for example, escaping from the cultists in that village, or there's more defenses to fight when you're basically trying to capture Nassau. And it's those sort of things basically that that really sort of made me think more needs to be done with information in this game, because you really want to basically tell your players what to expect so that they can actually sort of enjoy your game more. Also note, by the way, as well, that another thing I basically did in this game mode here, I didn't turn the horse rule on, or the active turn thing on here as well. I'll note for the active turn that is sort of a preference thing, because I'm not playing chess here. I'm playing this a regular tactical game where I have an army, the other enemy has an army. I want all my units basically sort of be engaged, right? So it's not well, I just have a few units here, a few units there, but it's basically sort of all my units basically are engaged in the battle. So that's a sort of a preference thing. But the horse rule. So I want to note that I think that's a really good idea to have sort of a horse rule in this game, where your units basically get an extra damaging drive on their attacks. But at the same time, I turned the horse rule off because I sort of felt that the horse men in this game are already overpowered as is. Basically your cavalry S's and paladin S's later on, your cavalry L's and paladin lances basically later on, they're very powerful units basically in their own right, because they have that move again ability. Basically with my units basically in this game, stuff I was always doing is basically using my cavalry to move in, hit something, and move out of the way, so my other units can move into basically do their attacks. And I did this quite frequently to win some engagements and stuff like that. And in many ways I didn't think they needed any more power in that, so I kept the horse rule basically off. Something I basically would probably note, and here's the thing, I'm not sure if basically this is a problem with the horse rule, for example, that maybe they get extra damage to lance attacks and stuff like that, but really the units in this game need to have some strengths and weaknesses, sort of they did in Fire Emblem, where the axe beats spear, the spear beats sword, the sword beats axe. And it's not so much that the infantry units basically need it, but so much as the cavalry units basically need it, because in this game really, when you're basically playing the cavalry, they feel they're the most powerful units basically in the game, outright basically, so to speak. The Dragoons are nice, by the way, because they can fly around and stuff like that, but you can't really recruit them. But the horsemen, you can basically you can go in, you can recruit a throng of nomads, for example, to go around the field and just harass people with arrows and stuff like that. And I didn't really think the horses needed any more power than they already had, so I kept that off for that reason. But I would be like more inclined basically to turn like say horse rules on, stuff like that, if like maybe there's like more like aspects to it than like say like they get extra damage. So if maybe they do like extra damage to like the lance attacks and stuff like that, then that would be like something that would be like make me more inclined basically to like put it on, because well, they're going to deal more damage, but they're going to take more damage. So there's a thing about them. But even then, they'd probably still be quite powerful, so I'm not really sure. So yeah. Alright, so moving on here basically. And let's just go like this for now. So blah blah. We're just gonna go in here. So we're just gonna type in review here, because that's what we're basically doing. Now I want to note that this idea they basically had in the game, where like you're able to like make a custom character, was a really good idea. And I actually very much preferred this like sort of approach to the game, rather than like what you basically did in like Partia 1 or 2, where you basically like take the role of like the main character themselves. I think like the having like your like sort of like personal character being like just like around like Mook basically in the army was a really good idea to like basically like give like the main character his like own story, and then like you're just basically sort of like this like they're being like sort of like the the third party basically witnessing it. I have to wonder though basically about like some of the choices basically, but overall I think like this like this solid idea is basically like a solid premise basically to go on. Now I want to basically like something about like the unit classes and stuff like that, and like the backgrounds and stuff like that. Again, this is like something where like information is like is key basically to playing the game, and I'm not basically like at this point let's just sort of exit out here. We don't need to like the like application anymore for this point. So we're just gonna quickly close this out, and let's just go over to like my guide here, where I like have a little breakdown like the characters and stuff like that. So your character and preview full guide. Now I basically took the time basically to like go through and like basically like investigate like what the your character basically does. And I want to note that like it's a good idea to basically have it so you can basically make your own character for this game. But at the same time, I think it would have been a lot better if you actually could like adjust your stats to like what you basically prefer basically. I'll note basically for example that like going into the game for example, I initially went in I think with like the like farmer and parent. So I basically had like an axe guy. And overall, I think this is probably like one of the worst choices basically to get, because you really can't do like anything with like that one defense here. And I found like my character is basically like if I send him into like even like attack something, basically it'll be like this one shot him basically like on the first like stage for example. So it felt sort of useless basically to like just like go in like blind. I think it would have been a lot better that instead of like having like sort of like you make like a background for him. That instead perhaps like you have like sort of like this like usual like character duration screen, where like you go in, maybe like you pick like what like class you're going to be. So let's just say like I want to be like an axe guy for example, and instead of like basically having like basically like a breakdown of like what the modifiers are going to be for like how to basically build up and stuff like that, you instead basically like have sort of like I want this character to be like really defensive for example, so like maybe he has like 5 or more like defense, and I basically go in, okay, so I want this guy to have like this much defense, and basically like the game will be like, okay, you have much defense, you'll have like this sort of detriment basically attached to it, so to speak. So basically you build up your character, and you're allowed to sort of get like the strength base you really want them to have, but you have to take the detriments to go with them, so that sort of thing. Actually, like something to throw out here, by the way, something I actually could have done, by the way, that could have been a lot better, I think, would actually be like sort of have like sort of like random generation, so like you sort of what you did with like the recruitment thing there. So you could have actually had like you could actually create like like all these like questions and stuff like that, but it could be like random for, sort of like the stats and stuff like that. So you can actually like reroll your character like you got the stats basically you want. So you can basically reroll it and basically have like okay, so you have like say randomized like defense, magic, skill, all this stuff basically right there, and you can't really tell like what the growths are going to be for it, but you can basically see like what the stats can be initially, so you can actually like sort of like build up what the character's going to be good at and stuff like that. But yeah, overall, I like the idea of like the premise for like having like a sort of like custom-made character you can basically like sort of make at the start of the game that's like separate from like the main character. Overall, good idea. All right, so let's just sort of continue on here a little bit, and I'm just gonna keep in my guide here. I'm just going to go to promotions. So I want to look at in this game that like I actually think that promotions are like they're done okay for like what they basically are. Like you basically like, can go in, get to say like level 10, and if you want to, you can promote your character into like the upgraded class. I want to note that I think this could be done like a little bit more interesting than basically what's basically presented in the game. For example, I think it might be a good idea that instead of like having it so like your characters basically like go up to like their level 10 or more, get promoted, like can go up to level 20 after that. It might be a good idea that instead of like them like going back to level 1, if you basically promote a character like their upgrade class, they actually stay in like their current level. So if I basically like have like say an Axeman for example, I level him up to like say level 15 and basically promote him to like a warrior. He basically still like gonna be a level 15 warrior, but he just has like the bonus like stats from being promoted and stuff like that. And like like keep leveling up to like level 20 if he wants to at that point if he wants to. And here's the thing basically about why I'm basically suggesting like having a slate to sort of keep your levels. Basically in this game, I found like units like to say the Ballista and like the Healer, they're like very good stat wise for what they basically did, but at the same time, once you basically got like past like level 20 and like your like promote characters for example, basically once they like get into like your level 30s and level 40s for what they're basically worth. Once you basically get that high, your healers and your ballistas become a little bit less useful because well, for the healers basically nothing's really going to be hurting your troops anyway, so you don't really need to heal them. And for the ballista, they basically just get outpaced by like your troops, so they can't really do anything to begin with. I think it might have been a good idea, basically, to like have it so, like instead of like your like units basically getting like reset to level 1, that you basically keep your levels, just for a simple reason that like it basically stops them from being able to level up like a whole lot, and they basically get like their stat increase from being promoted, but there can always be like sort of detriment, a detriment to basically add to it instead, like after it promotes, like basically make it so like you want to basically like keep leveling up to level 20 in their base form. All right, so I should probably explain this a little bit better. So imagine basically like you have like your Axeman basically here, and that's not what I want, but I am great at like this, but whatever. New text document. But yeah, basically like you have your axe, and imagine basically like you get him up to level 10, and like you promote him, and it's like still level 10. But it's just gonna be like a level 10 like warrior. So here's basically something I note by the way. I think this could be like work as like a sort of system basically, because what you can basically do is say like the axe like levels at like twice like the speed, but the warrior basically levels at like 1.5 speed. So basically the idea is like you can promote your characters basically early, but it'll basically slow down their ability to like level up after that. So it'll take them longer to get to level 20 basically once they're promoted. And I think that sort of system would work a lot better because their stats wouldn't like go like as seemingly high, and at the same time like you'd be like more pressed basically to like manage like your characters a little bit, other than like letting them basically just like sort of like sit there and like accrue experience basically to like whatever end to like super powerful and stuff like that. All right, so I've ran on here for like 14 like minutes here and stuff like that, but actually there's one more thing I basically note. I actually want to basically like talk to you a little bit on like tone space basically, and I guess I'll go to Lance's guide for this. So let's just go over here and let's go to like the items. All right, so I'll note basically in my playthrough that you basically saw. I made like heavy use of basically tomes to like level up my characters, but I didn't really use them basically in the stages themselves, rather than like I used them in the arena. I think that tome should be like an equipable item that you can only like have like one on your character to like basically use to like basically get a stat boost. And there's basically obvious reasons basically why I suggest this. You'll note basically like in my playthrough like sometimes I basically jump into the arena and I basically put like a defense ring basically on my characters and like put a bunch of books basically on them. And I assume basically that means that they'll have like, if I have say like a tome of like, light and like sword and stuff like that, they'll basically have like the bonuses like, stack rolls for like skills and action and stuff like that as well. I think that tome should probably be like equipable items, just like everything else. So, like you can only have like one tome basically on your character, and like get the bonus basically from it. And it basically like the reason for doing so is just like you're not really like encouraged basically to like do that sort of thing where I basically like have like that sort of like idea where you basically like just have like multiple tomes based on a single character like defense ring, and it's like sort of level up based on everything by like using up all these like tomes like getting like the massive stats basically you got from them. And there's really a good reason for doing this. It's just for the simple reason that like your characters won't be like getting super powerful as a result of that basically. I'm not basically in my game. Like the only character that ever like really presented like a real threat to me was like Cygnus, because he has stats basically like super high and stuff like that. But every other character basically in the game that I basically fought was like not that strong. And it's basically for this reason I was able to put like all the tones basically on my characters that like was not very strong. So yeah, I think it'd be a lot better if like the tones basically like were restricted a little bit. To some extent, this could be said like as well to the jewelry as well, because like in some instances I would basically have like all this jewelry basically on my character as well to like get them like massive like boosts and stuff like that to their like character standing. And I think it would have been a lot better perhaps if like I'd maybe restricted like what like jewelry they might be able to wear. So like I don't have like massive amount of like magic jewels and like speed rings and like skill rings on like the same character, making them like super powerful. But yeah, that's basically like some initial thoughts basically about like this stuff right here. Now, I don't think there's a whole lot basically I want to basically state about like about like the other stuff basically in this game. I will note by the way that like for characters and recruitment by the way that like let's go to my own guide for this basically right here. And by the way, I will note that this guy's been submitted by this time, so if you're like viewing this, you can actually view it in GameFAQs. I'm probably already like you probably already like found my YouTube channel from it, but whatever. But yeah, I'll note that there's also like one more thing to basically like note by the way, and that's like about the recruitment basically of like your like base characters basically can like get like join you on your like on your adventure basically, so to speak. I'll note that basically once you get to like rescuing like your like province of Berlant, and you're basically able to like recruit like just like mooks from like the random crowd. I thought that was like a really great mechanic for like buffering up your army, but at the same time, I think it could have been done a lot better. I'm not basically the idea of like only recruiting like level 1s basically means that you have to like train up like a mook from like the ground all the way up. So I think it would have been a lot better that instead of like recruiting like level 1s, it could be like a little bit more like it could be that the soldiers you recruit are a little bit more like fixed like the level of your troops basically. So if it basically like are in like stage 9 and like Lux is basically at level 10, then like you're probably gonna have like characters that are like level like 7 or 8 basically joining you at that point, so they're not like completely useless, and you have to like go to the arena basically and train them and stuff like that. Stuff like that I think would have been a lot better for like recruiting like of your characters, because even though like I could recruit characters, I was not like really interested in basically recruiting a whole lot of them, just for a simple reason that I had to train them like basically up. Like I did so for like the Corsair I basically had in the end, but the Corsair was like just like I just want to show off like there's like the unit that can swim. But whatever. The only other thing to basically note about recruiting characters by the way I should probably throw out is that like it could also be like better to like the skills that they basically get. Those skills could actually be like less randomized and more like specific to like the classes that are like being like recruited and stuff like that. I'll note that basically when I was basically like going through and like recruiting characters, it's actually possible for me to get like Mug for example on like characters that like don't really like have like the thief class. So actually like for example like go in and like I get like a nomad for example, and like here I have the skill for Mug, and it's like this is not a thief. Why does like this like nomad have a like the Mug skill? Actually, there's one more thing I should probably note by the way, and that's about the mercenaries that can actually recruit from the inn. It's probably worth knowing by the way that for mercenaries that you actually recruit from the inn, it probably would have been like better to like not have them like randomized like as you basically did, but actually have it like each stage basically has like a sort of like choice between like what mercenaries you can sort of like pick. And you know what? Let's just sort of jump back into the game here to sort of like explain just like last little bit here. And of course, I closed the application, so I'll have to restart here, but whatever. Basically, sort of like explain this a little bit. I think it would have been a lot better to like have it so like you can actually sort of like pick what mercenaries you actually like have like during like each stage, as opposed to like just having it randomized like you did for like Partia 3. In many ways, I thought like Partia 1 actually had a better system for like managing your what character base you can actually get from like the end, because when you're basically like going through like the initial like character in the inn, you basically saw like I basically like star scum to basically get like a specific mercenary, and I basically wanted to get like Ife, and I think it would have been a lot better about instead of like having it so like the first stage basically like has like the randomized mercenary basically get. It would have been better to like have it so like you can actually select like a mercenary to pick up instead. And this will just like load here for a little bit, but whatever, let's just jump in here. Let's go back into like last save right there. So let's just go say to like this one here, I guess. I'll note basically like in this game, for example, it would have been like a good idea to like have like say Lava be like sort of like an earlier type of character you can basically recruit, and his stats basically are like not that great, and like honestly he'll be like completely like he'll be completely made obsolete by like your other troops basically later on. But the thing about Lava here is that he can actually be like a really good like early game unit to like sort of like buffer like your weak army, so to speak. So I could see like Lava being like a really good hire to pick up basically like in like one of the earlier stages of the game. And basically how it's like how it probably would have been a lot better to like do it. It probably would have been a good idea for like the earlier stages to have say like Lava be like a character basically like recruit along with like say like some other like strong characters, and these like strong characters would be there so like just buffer your army, so like they'd be like able to like get by if you want to early on in the game if you needed it. And basically later on you could have like the randomized characters like pop up in the end, but earlier on it'd just be good to have like these like these like sort of like these like starter blockers to like basically like help you like get over like the earlier game humps. Anyhow, I've actually gone for like a fairly long time like this video here, and you know what? I'm actually gonna like just stop right here this video. I'm gonna basically like pick up in like the next one, because I'm actually do like another like companion video to this, where I'm just gonna go through like all those different stages and sort of like do a review of like each different stage for you, just like and give my thoughts about like each stage. But hopefully this was like helpful to like give you some ideas for like how to improve the game and like go from here. So other than that, take care. I'll see you guys in a final video that comes after this one.